Okay, this week's guest is a former Blue Team favourite who played for a club at both the Highland League and in the Scottish League. I'm thrilled to have this week on the podcast is Steve King. Steve, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Colin. Cheers. How's yourself?
I'm not too bad. It's been a wee while since we've seen you playing for Peterhead. It must have been about 20 years since you were last in a Peterhead shirt.
It's been a while.
Some of this,
a few grey hairs since then.
Some of the current squad weren't even born when you were playing, but I don't want to age you too much.
Thanks for that. Jesus.
We're off to a good start. You must have seen a lot of changes though in the club, even when you were there and even now since you were playing.
Yeah, I suppose whether you can say you're fortunate to be part of the old setup, I suppose we are. When I joined at Recreation Park when George took me from Montrose, being part of the club there and seeing it evolve to where it is now, the club has, whether you're a local or you're not, and you agree with what's happened with the club going into the Scottish League, how the club's evolved from then to now is massive. Just totally different.
It's an interesting subject that I think sometimes it still gets mentioned even now, that maybe we've lost our local identity slightly in terms of the players that's coming in and managers and things like that. Do you think that's just part and parcel of how the club's evolved, or do you still need that local identity, do you think?
Yeah, I think at the time the club applied and were accepted, I think the locals were obviously going to be up in arms about it, because there is that threat that you're going to lose that local presence. But I think to survive, and the club's probably realised it now, to survive in that level, there's no way that you're going to be able to achieve what they have achieved now purely on local person. I mean, you look at the clubs that have been in Ross County, Calais. They will have an element of local, but they've certainly had to rely on a lot of travelling players to come to the club. Montrose, my ex-club, were no different. They've been in the club for so many years, and they've had to rely on players from Aberdeen, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee, the Angus clubs, and it's just you have to move with the times. It is frustrating for the local community. I'm quite sure Jim McNally and his backroom staff are developing the youth within Peterhead and trying to bring out through some local rising stars. And we achieved with in the first couple of seasons, we didn't add a huge element of Scottish League players. It was generally a lot of the actual squad. It was in the Highland League. We brought Billy Herd in and some other experienced Scottish League players. And we managed to hold our own. But when you're looking at the long-term future of the club, it's not sustainable. And I think you have to rely on that Scottish League expertise to come in and bring the club to where it is now and what it's achieved over the years.
You mentioned that Inverness there, obviously it was the two clubs that combined to create Inverness, Calais, Thistle, and you've seen what they've done in the last 20-25 years. So I guess you may upset a few people at short term, but there is that long term look up, in terms of what they want to achieve. And for Peterhead, they maybe had to look at that kind of style and say, well, if we're going to develop as a club, this is what we need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think now, if you were probably to ask a lot of locals now, it's maybe benefited a lot of local business people. The club going into the Scottish League. And you look at what Cove has achieved locally as well. They've achieved a huge amount in such a short space of time, but the pressure that they've now got going into the next division, the next step up, is sustaining that, and that comes at a cost, not just financial, but it comes at a cost of losing some players that they've currently got to bring in new players. But I think going into the league is a big risk. Elgin, did this, moved at the same time as ourselves, and they've had to rely on bringing in a lot of ex-Scottish League players also. But to achieve that, you need to bring in the financial support from local businesses and that, and I think some people will have benefited from that, and I think it's it's the small local businesses that you want to benefit rather than the bigger sort of corporate funding companies.
And there's a generation of Peterhead fans now that only really know Peterhead as a football league side rather than a Highland League side now.
Yeah, exactly, and it is great to see. I mean, I think a lot of locals, and I was obviously one of them. We lost that local derby. A lot of fans thrived on the derby with the Brockers, with Fraserburgh, and it was, regardless of whether it was a cup game or a league game, those were special games. And just for the fans alone, going into the Scottish League meant that they lost that. And that's a lot for a lot of loyal supporters that have stood by the club over the years. But again, you can just see the appetite to succeed at a higher level from Peterhead, and what they've achieved over the last sort of 10, 15 years is phenomenal.
We'll touch on, I'll speak more about Peterhead later on, but it'll be good to talk a bit more about yourself. A lot of people maybe didn't really know maybe much about your career prior to Peterhead, and maybe just people think you just played for Peterhead, but you had a couple of clubs prior to that, and you were in the Highland League with Rothes back in the late 80s.
Yeah, I was played for a juvenile club, Don Shamrock, and I fell foul to a bit of naivety in my part, not knowing what I was going to do when I left juvenile football. I really honestly didn't know, and I didn't know how that side of things worked. And I played a game down at Inverdee, one of the pitches that they use for juveniles, and one of my mates, Steve Gerrard, his dad was assistant manager to Ray Bernardi at Rothes, and basically Jim signed myself and Stephen after one of the games, and the following night, that unknown to me, there was scouts at the game, and I had Dave Watson at Buckley Thistle, Tom Cummins at Cove, John Fitzpatrick at Huntley and Tone, and Jimmy Wilson at Keith phoned me that week asking what I was doing and would I be interested in, and I had to, embarrassingly, I had to say to each one of them, sorry, but I've already signed for Rothes. And I didn't, I had no guidance. I was living with my auntie and uncle at the time, and it was just a naive mistake that whether it's affected my football over the. I never look back and think it was. I could have done anything better, because if anything, it probably made me a slightly better player playing for a so-called lesser club at the time compared to the other clubs. Because I thoroughly enjoyed my 2 years at Rothes, absolutely loved every minute, and it was a huge shock jumping from juvenile as a sporty kid into what we call the mayonnaise level of football. Mm-hmm. But I absolutely loved it. I loved Rothes as a club, and seeing what they've achieved, in the last couple of years is a huge credit to a club of such a small community. But yeah, I loved it up there. And then obviously moving from there to Montrose again was an even bigger step. And it was a step I didn't actually think I ever in my wildest dreams was going to achieve. And to this day, we used to get the green final. Most people will remember the green final, the sports paper on a Saturday, printed the Evening Express. And and this is no word of a lie. For some reason, I don't know why, but I used to watch Chick McClellan because I was a left back when I was younger. I used to watch Chick. My dad used to take me to see him when he was at Aberdeen. And for some reason, when I used to read the paper, I used to read the Montrose games, the little reports, and I used to name the team. And I remember the players that played for Montrose at that time, 90% of them at least were still at the club when I joined. And it was just a very surreal moment, turning up to training and actually playing with McClelland and Barr and Martin Allen and Alan Lyons and Alec Wright and John Sheeran. And I had to pinch myself. So yeah, and that was again, it was another level out with what I had been playing, and was a massive learning curve. The Scottish League, the 5 years I had down there was just fantastic. I would never swap it for anything.
Just going back to your time at Rothes, what was it like playing Highland League football at that time? Then in the 80s, was it as rough and tough as what they make it out to be?
A lot of players said it was tougher even before then, but that I didn't mind, because that was just I suppose I was never blessed with the skills of some players. I just had a winning mentality, and I would run through a brick wall for a team, and that was just me. Okay, I maybe had a couple of fleeting moments on the ball that probably I didn't even know I was doing myself, but looked good. But no, I think joining Ray Bernardi, taking me up there and playing at that level with Derek Thompson, Davy Simpson, and Derek Dewar, Jim Oliver, John McDonald, Robbie Baxter was fantastic. And I'll never forget my trial game. I had a midweek trial game before they signed me, and I was up at Inverness Thistles ground, and I was up against a guy called Titchy Black, who was apparently at the time was a flying winger, and I just remember I was so nervous going out into playing in that environment. Never had done it before. But then after that, sort of history. But no, I loved it up there. It was a great club.
Some interesting away trips on the bus then, or was it fairly low key?
Well, that was the thing. It was they were a club. Rothes didn't have a lot of money then, and buses where we used to get the car up. So we used to get the car with about maybe 2 carloads of guys from Aberdeen. Used to go up to Rothes, and we didn't train with the guys during the week. We trained with Lads Club Juniors in Aberdeen, and we only trained with them during pre-season. But yeah, some of the journeys were quite good. My mate Scotty Brown and I, we used to he joined us in the second season. We used to go up and stay with some of the players over the weekend, Derek Thompson and Davy Simpson, and just stay back and have a good laugh with the guys. And they were as I said, they were a great bunch of guys. There was never any of this local boys taking in outsiders from Aberdeen, and I thought they made you so welcome, as did the whole club. But yeah, it was a great experience, and we had one of the trips that we had pre-season was up to Shetland. We went and played a mini tournament up in Shetland, and that was an eye-opener. As a young lad, my word, that was a huge eye-opener. But again, it's just great memories that you can't forget about. That it's fantastic.
So how did the move to Montrose come about then?
It was just an out of the blue. Johnny Cowie, who was the manager at the time, who was great. I mean, I love Johnny. He was a great manager, and he knew he was a great goal scorer in his day, and he just said that Montrose Football Club have come in for you. And obviously the manager at the time, Ian Stewart, had been on the phone, as they do. They go behind closed doors and tap you in terms of finding out you're interested in coming to the club. And I was probably in a bamboozled at why I was being asked to go down and play in Scottish League football. I really didn't, I enjoyed my experience in Highland League, only 2 years there. I thought, I was only 19, 20, and I thought, well, why am I going down to, that level? So met Scott and I both went down at the same time, went down the train, and again, stupid boys thinking, because we were free agents, going from a Highland League club to Scottish League at the end of your contract meant you were a free agent. So of course we were full of nonsense in our heads, thinking about how much money we were going to ask for. Just totally naive to the whole situation of Scottish League football. And we met the manager, Ian Stewart, and Scott got pulled through in this hotel to discuss terms and stuff like that. And then I got pulled through And we both agreed a stupid figure what we'd be asking for. We got absolutely nowhere near it. but to be honest, in hindsight, it was never about money. And I know that the game has changed so much from a financial point of view in terms of the rewards that players get, even part-time now, and it is going a bit ballistic, but it is what it is, and we have to move with the times. But back then, I could play for nothing. My beer money on a Saturday night, I think, was what your wages came to, and your signing on fees were nothing really. It didn't mean a lot to me, to be fair. Getting a jersey on a Saturday was all I was worried about.
And it wasn't unusual for a player to move from the Highland League to what was the Scottish League at the time, in terms of, I think there was only 3 divisions at the time, the Premier League, Division 1, Division 2. So it wasn't an unusual thing. Of course, quite a few players had moved from Highland League to that level.
Yeah, I mean, when I joined Montrose, we used to meet the same point for training Monday, Thursday, and 3, sometimes 4 carloads of players just for Montrose alone. And then we had the element of the Dundee guys who had about 2 or 3 carloads also. And then with Davy Larter and a couple of guys from the goalie from Edinburgh. And that's what they relied on. They relied on that support. But you had a lot of Aberdeen players, at the time. Carly weren't in the division, but Inverness Carly had Wilson Robertson, Kevin Mann there at Bob Summers, a lot of players from Aberdeen. But Scottish League, definitely, you had likes of Paul Payton, Gary White at Forfar. You had players playing at Arbroath, so they relied on quite a bit. I don't think there's as many now in the sort of Angus clubs that that had Aberdeen players, but obviously you've got your Cove that are in there now also. But yeah, at the time, there was quite a lot of Aberdeen players playing in the Scottish League.
You mentioned Chick McClelland earlier on. Obviously, you're now going to be playing in the same team as him. Both playing in the same position. So was he a good person to learn from, or was he someone that you were looking to learn from?
Yeah, I mean, so when I actually signed these shirts, said that Chick was retiring, and I think Chick at the time was about 36, I think, around about that, and he said that with Chick retiring, he wanted a left back, and he saw me as being a good fit for the club, for the team. And again, another naive from my part. It took me about 3 months to get a game, but because Chick trained and he played, and to be honest, it was probably the best thing for me was to sit on the bench or in the stand and basically sit and watch him and learn from him, because he was a phenomenal defender, an unbelievable professional, even at part-time level. And I learned a huge amount from him just watching him. He was never the best going forward, but there was very few strikers or wingers that got the better of him. And in those days, it wasn't compulsory to wear shin pads, and he never wore them. And some of the tackles he used to go in he used to turn away and he wouldn't look. But no, just actually sit and watch him, not just training with him and playing with him, but sit and watching him when I was so young was massive for me. And he was. I treated him like a mentor. He was very, very good to me.
When you say he was planning on retiring and you obviously was lined up to replace him, had he decided what he was going to be doing before then, or was it just a case of he was hanging up his boots and then see what was going to happen then?
No, I think Chick was very good, obviously, from his Aberdeen contacts, and that Chick was excellent with the youngsters. And I think the manager, Ian Shute at the time, had plans for Chick to support, be part of one of his backroom staff and support the younger guys coming through. So, and Chick was excellent with the youngsters. But no, I mean, he knew I would be down, not getting a game, and putting the hard graft in, and he would always whisper in my ear, "Look, your time will come." And there was never anything hidden by it. He knew my time was going to come, and he knew I was down at not getting the opportunity when I thought I should have. And then there was one day he had an absolute stinker. Rest in peace, Chick. But he had a stinker. We were playing Stirling Albion, and I think he got taken off at half time. And I went on, and that was that was it after them.
He moved into the manager's position, I think, as well with De Groovy as co-managers. Was that an easy transition for you then to see him as a mentor to then being your manager?
Yeah, because he understood. I mean, I always understood Chick's, his attitude and his professionalism. So I knew what he expected of me when he played me. So when Chick and Dougie picked me, and Dougie's mentality was probably the same from a winning perspective. I knew exactly what they wanted from me when I put on the shirt, and again, as I said earlier, I was never a flair player. I was asked to do a job, and I would go and do it the best I could, and more if I could. Chick and Dougie were a funny partnership. Dougie played still as well, and Chick was sort of like the manager on the side. Dougie was the manager on the pitch, and by golly, he was. The different views. It almost felt like if I get to play him, you can play him. They had that almost like their favourites at times. That's what it felt like anyway. Whether it was or not, I'm not sure. But Dougie's presence on the pitch at his age and his fitness and his physique was phenomenal. And him and Andy Dorman were a phenomenal partnership at the back and at the central. And Dougie's presence on the pitch just scared the bejesus out of a lot of defenders. But no, I found it quite easy, to be honest. I didn't really change the way I played. I mean, they pushed me into the left midfield, as well as playing left back, and I played centre half as well a few times. So, but yeah, I didn't have really a preference. All I cared about was playing and winning.
Did you notice a vast difference in playing in the Highland League to then playing in the Football League? Was there a big difference?
Well, this is a bone of contention. This always brings up arguments for a lot of players in the Highland League that have never played Scottish League. But personally, I think that there is. It's not a massive difference. I think where you notice the difference, and some players that will have played in both will probably appreciate what I'm saying, is that the Scottish League, certainly the difference is the last 20 minutes of a game. I always felt that. Even when we went back into Scottish League with Peterhead back playing in there, I noticed it probably more so then. Maybe that's because I was getting older, I don't know. But certainly the last 20 minutes you cannot switch off. And the level of fitness, I think, is different. I think it's a higher level of fitness. Again, it's maybe changed days now, but certainly back then. And the argument is always that Highland League clubs think there wasn't a massive difference, but they were always comparing Highland League to Scottish League through a cup tie. Mm-hmm. So where in Highland League I've got a phenomenal track record of cup upsets and with Scottish League clubs. But a cup tie is totally different. When you're having to perform against, as a Highland League club, against a Scottish League club week in, week out, I think you would notice the difference. And that's why, you look at the Elgins and the Ross Counties and the Inverness Cullies and now Cove, for example, as well. They're having to strengthen their team every season because the level's getting higher and higher. So, but no, I think that the level of football at Highland League is fantastic. I haven't seen many games of late, but certainly when we were involved, even when I went to Keith and played and even managed with Darren Still, I think it is a good level, definitely. It's a fantastic, and there's been a lot of fantastic players throughout the Highland League and in the past and even now. But it's not a massive difference between, but I think it's just as I said, the last 20 minutes of a game over a period of a season, I think that's when you do notice the difference.
Yeah, a one-off cup tie compared to 36, 44 games over a season would be the difference.
Yeah, and you're playing against potentially ex-full-time Scottish Premiership players as well that are maybe nearing the end of their full-time career and are taking a drop back down to playing part-time in the Scottish League. And and they strengthen the smaller clubs. So you're competing against that as well, and you're competing not just against fitness, the experience as well. So it is a difference.
You got promotion in 91 up to the first division then. So good season for yourself personally as well then.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was one of those seasons. Still in Albion, they won the championship then, and it went to the wire. We were away to Queen of the South last game of the season, and it was a funny one because earlier in that season we had them at home in the B&Q Cup, and we got beat 7-4 after extra time. And I scored a hat-trick that night. I know some won't believe that, but I did. And I didn't even get the match ball because I think it was the boy Maguire, scored 4 for Queen of the South. So that was a bit of it wasn't a great night. But we managed to make amends, but we had to play them last game of the season. And I think it was, if we had gotten beaten, Cowdenbeath had won, Cowdenbeath went up, I think, with Stirling Albion, but we beat them 3-0 on the last day of the season on a very bumpy, rock hard pitch, and there was a huge support down from Montrose. I mean, it was a fantastic day. It really was, and going up to play in the first division again is something that, you know, players of, you know, my ability and level, it's just a dream come true.
Yeah, you're one division below the Scottish Premier League.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. You were playing against some of the clubs in the first division at the time. I think Kilmarnock, Dunfermline, Dundee, Partick Thistle were full time. So we're playing against all those clubs, and to play against them every week was, you know, you dream about playing them in cup ties, but playing them in, you know, every week was just superb. It was fantastic, great experience.
Did you find that you enjoyed playing at that higher level, or testing yourself against these supposedly better players or full-time players?
Oh, aye, absolutely. I mean, you did. I mean, I'm not going to lie. You would go out with a tummy rumbling, full of nerves. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But you just had to embrace it. And once the whistle went, you know, you were just up against another player in my head. But yeah, no, you just, those occasions you've got to take them when they come. You know, we had some great cup games to be a part of and play again. We had the League Cup at Dundee United. I was up against Dave Bowman. Hearts at Tynecastle. I was up against John Cahoon. I mean, that was a phenomenal experience. I mean, the manager told me before the game, so I want John Cahoon in the stand in 5 minutes. I kid you not, it took me 50 minutes to get a booking. I couldn't get near him, but he was phenomenal. But yeah, it's moments like that you look back now and you know, you look at your press cuttings and all that kind of stuff, and it does. You have to pinch yourself and think, God, did I actually play then? And I've always been grateful for the opportunities I've been given, you know, from any football club. And all I've done is to try and repay them, is to do the best I can. But yeah, that level, first division, was fantastic. Really good.
As good as that year might have been, the following year maybe wasn't that great. Obviously, it ended with I think a relegation, straight back down again. Was that one of the highest highs to then one of the lowest lows?
Yeah, I landed in hospital. I had an operation in my stomach, and I missed probably a good percentage of the second half of that season. It was on Hogmanay, and we were due to play Forfar away, and I think it was Jim Leishman's first game, because Chick and Dougie both got sacked, and Jim took the club on board, and I only managed to play, I think, maybe 6 or 7 games the rest of the season under Jim, and we got relegated that year, and it was disappointing because we started the league off really quite well. We were holding our own, you know, we were doing quite well, and we didn't actually, Chick and Dougie didn't actually spend a lot of money bringing a lot of players in. It wasn't until Jim came in that he started adding players, Jim Smith, I think it was Craig Forbes, Graham Forbes, Cammy Fraser, etc. So then a lot of other players started coming in to obviously try and strengthen the squad and stay up. But no, we failed that, and that was disappointing. I have to admit.
How did you get on with Jim Leishman then?
I don't know if you'll be watching this. No, I got on with Jim. He's a character. He played me. I can't. When I did get fit, he played me. So I can't say he didn't. He wanted to keep me. There was a loophole in the Scottish League at the time. My work, obviously, I worked in the oil and gas industry, and my work was pulling me back sort of home. And that was when I got the call from George Adams at Peterhead. So yeah, it was disappointing to leave the club because I loved my time down the toes. It was a very special time. But yeah, no, coming back to Highland League, it probably suited me. I think, especially for my job.
Did you get any other offers once you left Montrose, or was it just the Peterhead offer?
Yeah, it was just the Peterhead offer, and I think the was it the manner in which I left. I mean, I left on good terms with the club, but I think Jim got a bit incensed at me leaving because he wanted me to stay at the club, but it was a loophole in the Scottish League that allowed any Scottish League player out of contract to sign for a lesser division, free as a free agent. And at the time, what they were doing was they were trying to measure it against Paul McStay. Celtic was a free agent; he could go and sign for a Highland League club. Celtic would get nothing, and it was the same for a couple of players that were at Forfar. Gary White and Paul Payton, they both signed for Huntly as free agents as well. So there was a bit in the press about it, and Jim was a bit cheesed off, and I can understand it, but I never saw it that way. I had good reasons to leave the club, and that was when George had approached me and asked my interest to join Peterhead.
And what was the first season like back in the Highland League? Was it similar to what it was when you were there at Rothes in terms of the abilities and standard?
I would say it took me a little bit of time to get adjusted to it again, purely because I'd good 5 good years at what I thought at the time was a different level. So it did take a little bit of time. George's management skills. I mean, I have a lot of time for George, and he was a character and a half, I have to admit. But his appetite to try and succeed at that level with youngsters, very much like Charlie Duncan at Fraserburgh. I liked how George was trying to achieve things and give youngsters opportunities, and he just wanted to bring me as a so-called more experienced player to come in and help out there on the playing side. But yeah, no, I mean, it was the right decision for me. You always look back and think, have you made mistakes? And definitely not. The 10 years I had at Peterhead were absolutely fantastic, with a lot of achievements, personal and team and club, and loads of memories.
What was those Brock Derby games then like to play in? Were they fierce?
Oh, I absolutely loved them. I don't know if some of the Aberdeen players that were at Peterhead at the time didn't like them, but I absolutely lapped them up. I remember my very first experience of Fraserburgh at Belsley was with Rothes, and at that time, as I said, cover and a face like a pizza and really short hair, spiky, and I, being a left back, I was always down by the supporters taking throw-ins, etc. And I used to get a lot of stick, and I was away to take a throw-in, and I was out the corner of my eye, this 10-inch landed at my foot. I was tempted to pick it up and take a drink out of it, but you just don't know what those Fraserburgh the supporters would have done to it. But no, I absolutely loved the derbies, and any Peterhead player, I would say, especially local. Your John Sibwrights, Jim Bain, and Jim Guy, and Ian Fraser, and that'll tell you exactly the same. they're a special occasion, and I just absolutely loved it because I loved the Needle. And the thing is, I've got an utmost respect for the club, but I think they're a phenomenal club, and what they've achieved and the players that have come out of that club is just, it's scary what they've been able to achieve with local players. I'm not sure how much now, and what Mark's done bringing in youngsters, but I certainly are the local, and then they still rely on it, but certainly when Charlie and Bruce are there, what the players that they had were just a very special team, I thought. I know that's going to be hard for some Blue Tuners to hear, but they were, and you have to take your hat off to them and give them credit where credit's due, but they were just a team that you could not switch off. Absolutely couldn't switch off. They fought to the very end, and they had a knack of getting that last minute goal. And I'll never forget the Aberdeenshire Shield Cup final at Cove, and we were absolutely giving them a torrid time. We were 3-0 up, I think, at half time. We started the second half, and the Shield was up in the Cove director's box that you could see through the glass, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, so I can't wait to get my hands on that Shield. And as the kick-off, I remember Colin Milne hitting the post. That would have been to go 4-0 up. But typical Fraser Bristol, they fought to the end. They beat 6-3 after extra time. I remember Russell McBride, I think, slid in the back post with 3 minutes in injury time to make it 3-3. But that was just the club that they were. But no, I've got a lot of really good friends. I've Paul Keith, I used to have battles with him. Chris Hunter, really good friend. Battles with them, Mikey Stephen, Wee Moby. Again, just special times of your life. And at times, horrible times of your life. There was nothing worse than getting beat for the Brochers, but it was nothing more satisfying than beating them as well. But they were the monkey on our back. We couldn't get the monkey off our back. They had the voodoo on us for a long time, and we just could not get them. And it took the cup final, and I have to mention it, the cup final at Huntly, that, to be honest, should never have been played, for the qualifying cup, and we beat them 7-0, and it was just, it was every single thing we did went right that day. But when you looked at the pitch and the conditions, I don't think it should have ever been played. But the standard football that we delivered that day was second to none. I mean, they just could not live with us. And after that, they then struggled to beat us. So it was like the tables had turned slightly. But yeah, no, I loved those games. Absolutely loved them.
Oh, come on, it's going again.
No, you're still there.
No, I'm still again. Sorry.
Right.
Everything. No, I was just going to say, you're doing yourself a slight disservice in that game. I think it was 8-0, not 7.
8-0, sorry. Yes, you're right. 8-0.
So we've got to make sure we'll get that the score right.
Yeah.
But so was it one of those games where it didn't really matter what you did in that season, but just beating the Broch was more important, or did you still want to try and succeed within the league as well, though?
No, I think wanting to succeed in the league as well. I mean, derbies are derbies at the end of the day. And you have the same with Rangers, Celtic, Dundee United, Hibs, and Hearts. But there was always a little bit of a niggle with us in Cove as well, because Peterhead had quite a high percentage of players from Aberdeen. So it became a sort of unofficial sort of derby as well, because Cove were predominantly all Aberdeen-based players. So there was always a little bit of a dig, a bit of needle in those games as well. But yeah, no, any time you played Fraserburgh, there was always an element of, how we're going to beat them today. And you used to dread seeing Michael Stephen, playing wide right. I mean, he was phenomenal. Could turn a game just from absolutely nowhere. But yeah, no, there were great games, but no, it definitely didn't remove the focus on the league. Absolutely not.
In terms of the league positions, your first couple of seasons were 14th and then 11th, but the points were getting better and better, and then I think 94, 95 we finished fourth, and 96, 97 we finished third. So there was that steady progress. And did you notice that in terms of the progress that the club was making upwards in the league?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the board changed. You know, Roger Taylor, Roger Morrison came in. The board started to change. There was a little bit more support from companies in terms of the sponsoring, etc. Managers, you know, George moved on. Jim Gang came in sort of temporarily. You know, Davy Watson then came in. Then you had Mitch and Ronnie. So each manager comes in, always has a different view of how they see the team and what the team needs to succeed. Every manager wants to come in and succeed, whether that's winning a cup or winning the league. And I think every manager that did come in had their own views of how they saw the club. And I think, you know, when you look at, you know, board of directors in terms of their decision making around who they take to run the team, etc. I think, you know, some boards make mistakes. I think when you look at bringing Davy Watson, for me, probably doesn't get as much credit as maybe he should have done, but he certainly brought a vast number of players that came in that started to turn the results around, and we started winning trophies and then the league, etc. But obviously Ronnie and Mitch did an excellent job added to that and bringing us to where we did with the trophies. But Davy was certainly, he was one of those managers that was very good at getting the right type of players into the club. And we just started strengthening the team, and you could see us getting stronger. And we had an excellent, you know, that year we won the league, we had an excellent team. And you look at players like Andy Gibson, you know, full-time with Aberdeen, you know, just a phenomenal player. He struggled to get a game. And he wouldn't make any bones about it. You ask him now, say, well, you know, the team was winning every week. You know, how could I, you know, moan about not getting a game? But when he did get his opportunity, Andy was fantastic.
You mentioned the sort of change of the board and things like that. Did that come about hand in hand with, you know, the change in a stadium and moving to Balmoor? Was that ambitions there early on from Roger?
So that, I mean, we were still a recreation park at the time. What goes on in the boardroom probably stays in the boardroom in terms of those decisions. You know, did they come in with a view to taking the club to a different venue, and was that part of their thoughts about going higher? I haven't got a clue, honestly. I just know that when they did come in, both Rogers had an appetite to get the club back to where it used to be, you know, in the early 80s and 70s, where, you know, Peterhead were a huge force to be reckoned with as a Highland League club. And I think they probably saw an opportunity with, you know, with the new stadium and potentially going into a new league. How those conversations came about, I honestly, I'm not sure, but it's certainly something I don't think we'll look back on and think it was the wrong thing to do. I think it definitely was the right thing. Albeit you will have people that say, no, we should never have joined, we should have always stayed at the recreation park, but you're never going to please everybody. But I think over the piece, I think the majority of the Peterhead community will think they've made the right decision.
What part of or what time in the process did you guys know that we were moving?
I hadn't got a clue. I'm being really honest. Trying to wrap my brains. I think you'll always, with situations like that, you're always going to get rumours that fly about, and it's a difficult one until things are confirmed that the move to Balmoor was definitely going to go ahead, and there would have been a lot of hoops and loops to jump through to get that, and the club would have been very au fait about not releasing any press release or any communication to players or backroom staff or anything like that until it was a done deal, and I think it was safe at the time. But I think there was a lot of rumours kicking about, but I'm quite sure that we would have been told in sort of plenty of time. And I think that the same with you know, going to the Scottish League as well, was probably as a player was a shock. Thinking that another two clubs could go into the Scottish League after, you know, Thistle and Cali joining and Ross County getting in as well. it was probably a bit, well, can't be letting another 2 clubs in. But yeah, no, it's been great.
Did the move, once you obviously knew it was confirmed, and once I guess the stadium was starting to get built, was it something that you were looking forward to? Did it excite you?
Oh no, absolutely, yeah. I like Recreation Park. I like playing there. When I played with Rothes, I thought it was a great pitch. Okay, the stadium etc. was probably aging a bit, but sometimes football stadiums have a bit of character, and some players like that. Would it still be standing there today in the state it was at? It would have probably needed to have been refurbished or updated if we were still at Recreation Park. So there's no point in trying to hide that fact. But I think the move to Balmore certainly brought an injection of excitement and a buzz around the town and around the club. It started to introduce a lot of different people at the club, volunteers, different backroom staff, catering people. You had a whole, everything under one roof, where previously it was a little bit more disjointed. But no, I think it certainly put a lot of excitement into everybody who was involved at the club, and they could only see positives going forward. And then getting into the league, obviously that was the next big step to take care of. And again, the club will have learned a huge amount from the day we first joined where they are now. And you can just see that in, yourself involved with podcasts, their website, and we wouldn't have had websites in our days. It was a program, and that was it. But yeah, no, I think it's been a. You could say whether it was a risk or a gamble at the time, but I think it's something that's paid off. But the club has had to move, bringing in the managers that they have done. Ian Wilson, Ian Stewart, Steve Patterson, Cooper, Sharon. And then I've got Jim, who's done a fantastic job since he's come into the club, and he's had to take the club to a level that he knows, having been from the Scottish League experience, he knows what he's got to add to it to keep that level of performance and better it, because they certainly aren't sitting on their laurels, and they want to get to and achieve what the likes of Cove have done. What Cove have got as a problem is that have they done it too quick? And you can't take away what they've done. I mean, it's unbelievable, but they've now stepped up to an even bigger level, and it's how do you sustain that?
Any favourite memories at Recreation Park or favourite games?
10 years, a lot. Recreation Park, scored a hat-trick there as well. I've got to throw these things because I never used to score goals, so when I do, I just make sure that folk remember it. Recreation Park, I think there's a lot of really good games, none that are really standing out. Not compared to what they used to be like back in the day in the Scottish Cup. I think, was it Arbroath or Forfar they played, and it went to a replay, but the game at Recreation was a midweek game, and I'll never forget it. I think I was at Rothes at the time, and I remember studying. I was at uni, and I was listening to the game, and it was phenomenal. The game itself. So I was never involved in anything at that level at Recreation Park. I think any of the games that we had were probably more at Balmore, but we had a lot of fantastic memories at Recreation. A lot of good games, a lot of bad games as well, because we get them. Being sent off there, which probably goes cap in hand with the type of football I played. But no, it was a great place.
97 actually turned out to be a half decent kind of year. You mentioned the 8-0 win against the Brock. There was also the 17-0 win over Fort William, which is obviously still a record to this day. Yeah,
and I didn't score either. So, but no, that was a funny day. I mean, Fort William, the bit that we as players were found out. And I remember Alan Lang's assistant at the time, he came in, he says the gaffer's just gone into their changing rooms and said, look guys, just keep your heads up. after they've just been humped 17-0. It was, Fort William, I mean, give them credit. They've been in the Highland League for a long time. It must have been so difficult to try and field a team, with local and bringing in players from Inverness and the travelling involved, and they've done so well to do what they've had, and obviously now they've pulled out. But I think that day they did struggle to field a team. They did have 11 players on the pitch, but it certainly wasn't the regular 11. And I felt for them a little bit, but only for a little bit.
So I say, did you kind of think, oh, all right, we need to ease off, or was it just a ruthlessness and just keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to be ruthless, because you never know when the shoe's going to be on their foot. We could be getting humped from a team, and they won't feel sorry for us. So no, definitely not. But I think it was probably more that there was some young players in there, and you just think, how do you pick yourself up for your next game after you've just been beaten 17-0? And that was probably quite hard for them. But yeah, it was just a game, another one that we just run riot. I think everybody I don't even know if Ivor Perry got a goal that day. Probably did, but yeah, it was one I didn't get on the clean sheet, get onto the scoring sheet for. That's for sure.
Do you think the move to Balmoor maybe helped elevate the club, or in terms of the playing style and things like that? For the new pitch and things like that. So do you think it helped in terms of the style of play?
Yeah, I think the surface was fantastic. It took a while to bed in. I mean, being a defender, I very, very rarely wore moulded boots. Very rarely. And I think I played that first season with mouldings the whole season, because it just couldn't take a stud. It was so firm. But yeah, the surface was fantastic, and it just, I don't know what it is. Probably the style of the stadium as well. It gives you that sense of not just openness, but it felt as though it made the pitch wider and longer, so you were able to play better football than we had at that time. We had some great football players, Scott Patterson, Scotty Brown, Kevin Tyndall, and that was obviously Scottish League, but Colin Milne, Derek Smith, all very, very skillful players, and we just played a level of football that some of the clubs just couldn't live with. But they did definitely excite a lot of the ball players, that's for sure.
So that was the first season in the new stadium. Then we finished third, and then on to the following season where we end up winning the league. And did you go into that season thinking that we could win it, or was it again just a case of we're progressing, just let's see how well we can do?
Yeah, I think, I suppose it's easy for me to say it now, but I think a lot of players, there was a lot of confidence the year we won the league. At the start of that season, when you looked at the strength of squad we had, we added, with Ivor, with Jim Cheen, Gary Clark, Ray Cormack, Mark Simpson, Scotty Clark, Brunner. I'm going to miss folk out here. Colin Milne, Yates, Scotty Patterson, Gary Clark. We had a cracking side. And just that team that you would have struggled to beat, and it just showed when you look at the record that we had to win the last 7 games, and they were all away, and we won every single one of them, and we won it. I think we officially won it at Nairn away. That was when we actually won the championship, and I think we won 3-0 that day, I think, if I remember. And we got the trophy at Fort William the following week. And because somebody had mentioned, I can't remember what it was, somebody had mentioned that the goals conceded at the time, we were, I think, on 19. And I think the record was, 20. And I might be wrong with these figures, but certainly something around about there. So we were sitting 19. Well, the Fort William game was a nothing really. If we'd gotten beat, we'd still won the league. But you wouldn't have heard myself and Jim Cheen and Mark Simpson and Ivor Perry at the back absolutely cussing and swearing to one another, because anytime we slipped up potentially Fort William scored, we lost. We didn't have the record for the least amount of goals scored, so we ended up winning the game 5-0. But yeah, it was quite comical. The Fort William guys couldn't understand why we were shouting at one another. So you won the league last week, but yeah, it was special.
You mentioned the defensive line there. You must have been a really good 4 or 5, if you like. You only had 2 losses that whole season as well. So just how much had you guys developed as a 4 or a 5, if you like, with the goalkeeper?
Well, I mean, having Ivor at the back behind you in the sticks, it gave you an element of confidence, definitely. He did give you a few heart attacks now and then, because he used to do as Hamish McCullough. He used to take on boys in the box, and you think, why didn't you just kick it up the park? But that was Ivor. Entertainment value went with him, but he was a phenomenal keeper. But probably for my age, all I did at the back was I would sit and sweep and just try and organise the guys in front of me in the defence and even in midfield. And that probably, the more I can organise them to do the work, not to say I was shy of doing the work, but the more I can protect Ivor, it would benefit us, because we had such a prolific goal scoring machine in front of us. The more I could get the guys to go where I wanted them and do what I wanted them to do, that was all I really did, really, at the back. Was just try and organise them, and that for me probably demonstrates the team's defence, and only letting in the 19 goals. So, but yeah, we had a good on that. I mean, I loved playing alongside Mark Simpson. He was the prettiest of looking guys to look at, right enough, but I always remember when he came to Recreation Park from Morton. He was down there as a young boy, and we signed him, and I thought, man of my own heart, just raw, not much ability, but well, he'll take the shirt off his back to play for a team and win. And you know, and I loved playing aside him. I thought he was a cracking lad, local, which was great again for the club. It was great to see somebody stand out the way he's done. And he went on and, you know, did his managerial piece as well. But just, I mean, for a guy that wasn't particularly tall as a centre half, he was about my height, but he was phenomenal in the air. Absolutely phenomenal. Probably wasn't scared about, you know, rubbishing his looks. Probably made him a lot braver than most.
I was about to say, between him and Ivor, you've got to be a special kind of a person to be deemed playing in that kind of positions.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does winning the league rank in terms of your achievements in your career?
I'd probably say it's up there as one of the best, I think. Obviously, getting promoted to the first division was huge, but winning the league, because the club had gone from I'd seen the journey when I first signed and played with so many players, and to get to what they've obviously wanted to achieve, and whether you can argue moving to Balmoor allowed that to happen. But you can't argue the fact that the club obviously brought in the right management at the right times to bring in the right players. And I think, and it's not just the ability as well, the character of players, I think it's got a huge amount to do with the success of clubs. You absolutely need character, whether that's from management or backroom staff or playing staff. You've got to have that. Because you can have a team full of ball players or a team full of defenders, and if you've got no character, I think you'll struggle. You need to have that dressing room. You had Edmund Toes, a guy like Les Barr, was just an absolute phenomenal character. I used to get excited getting on the bus and going to games just to see him, because he was so funny and cracking jokes, and it just his manner. And he just eased people. He eased players down. We're always nervous about going to games and look forward to it as well. But he just brought you back and forget about it. But again, ultimate professional. And you had them at Peterhead as well, Colin Milne, Raymond Yule. You had that banter. Scotty was a character in his own right. He was a pain in the backside at times. You had Dougie Baxter come in. So that character in the dressing room was brilliant. It was really, really good.
What was the celebrations like then after the title win? Anything you can mention before we go, just in case?
Well, most will know that Nairn's dressing room is not the biggest, put it that way. It's quite small at the best of time. It just was manic. It's probably no different than any other club celebrating a cup win or avoiding relegation. You see them in the telly. A lot of players have been a part of it at some point in their career. If not, hopefully they will be, because it is a very, very special moment, because you get the backroom staff come in, the directors come in, the champagne's flowing. I remember going out to the Nairn County Social Club, and it was bedlam. And then the bus, I think that night, I might be wrong, but I'm sure the bus went straight back to Peterhead, went back to the Social Club, and we had a night in the Social Club. I actually think Scotty Patterson got naked. Somebody will correct me, but I'm positive he took his clothes off in the Balmore Social Club. But it was just a phenomenal, a lot of hard work by everybody at the club, and it paid off. But I think a lot of patience as well, in achieving what we achieved, especially that year, because that was a fantastic season.
Any particular reason why he got naked, or did he just fancy it?
Oh, Scotty was just, again, a character. Scotty, when he had a drink, and just did a habit of doing things out the ordinary. It was just the way he was. Very intelligent guy as well. You wouldn't believe it, but yeah. But he was a fantastic player. He's a player that I had huge admiration for when he played at Lossy. But when he came to the club, I thought, no, he's a quality player, and it was disappointing he didn't get to play as much as I personally felt he probably should have. But fantastic ball player.
You mentioned the success that season. So we'd won the league. I think Aberdeenshire Cup as well. The year before was the qualifying cup. So that was like 3 trophies within 2 years, for it, when the club had maybe going through a balance spell, not winning anything. So that transition or the continued upward trend would almost kind of peak there. Did you feel as though that everything was going right at that time, and everything in terms of moving to the new stadium, everything was just clicking?
Yeah, it's people make clubs, and taking the right people in at the right times to make the right decisions, or what are perceived at the time as the right decision, for it to all pay off, I think was great. But what we achieved that year, you're right, was phenomenal. But then the challenge then for the same people that have got you there is we've got to try and achieve the same again, because you don't want to sit back. You want to keep winning. You want to keep winning leagues and cups. And it's that becomes a tough part, because you put yourself up in that pedestal to be knocked down. Mm-hmm. And teams are trying doubly as hard the following season to knock you off that pedestal. And that's where you've got to show your character as a club, not just as on the pitch, but as a backroom staff, management staff, and as a club. But it was tough. It was very tough. We did win one off. We did win a trophy at the following season. I can't remember which one it was now. I can't remember. I'm lost.
It might have been the Shire Cup again, was it?
I think it might have been the Shire Cup, yeah.
I was just going to say, did you find it difficult being the hunted instead of being the hunter, if you like?
I think it got frustrating. I didn't particularly mind it at all, to be honest. It didn't really change me. Some players maybe did affect them. If anything, it probably, because we had such a good season and everything felt as though everything clicked most times, what it maybe did bring in was maybe an element of complacency, the fact that we've done it. And I'm not saying that's a deliberate thing. That's just something that kicks in with players at times. No player does it deliberately. And then what happens after that is a little bit of frustration then kicks in amongst the players on the pitch, and a little bit of niggling goes on, and all of a sudden you're 1-0 down, and you're scrambling to beat a team that you would have comfortably beaten the year before. So I think that was something that was difficult to deal with.
Halfway through that season, then the announcement was that we're going to be joining the league. Did that become a distraction for you? Because obviously you knew that doesn't matter what happened in terms of that season, you were going to be playing in the Scottish League the following season.
I don't think, some people may say it was shown in maybe some performances, it was visible, but I don't think. I mean, it was obviously it was hot topic. It was spoken about a lot in the bus and what have you. But I don't think it really affected us when we went over the line to start a game. What it did do, before the end of the season, it did actually put a difference of opinion in some of the players in terms of whether they wanted to stay with the club and go into the Scottish League. I remember we were down. I think Ian Wilson was possibly on holiday at the time, and Alan Lyons was. No, I'm talking rubbish. It was at Alan Lyons' office, and Ian Wilson was there. Sorry, and we were signing contracts. And I always remember speaking to Gary Clark, because he was very in between whether about going or not. And I just said, I said, well, why don't you just sign for a year? Experience Scottish League. If you don't like it, you can always go back to Highland League. I said, but for me, I would, my personal experience of Scottish League is, I think you'd be silly not to give it a go. And I mean, in hindsight, it's a shame for Gary what happened to him, but he was absolutely on fire at the start of that. I mean, he was just. It was phenomenal what he did to some of the defences in the Scottish League. Absolutely tore them to shreds. And then, that night in the cup, was it the cup? It was a cup game against Forfar. He broke his leg, and I felt so sorry for him because the guy had a buzz about him because he knew himself how good he was playing, but he was tearing experienced defenders to shreds. His pace, his physique, his ability to score goals. I think they just got a complete shock. They didn't realise, we possessed such a player, and he was just on fire. And it was such a shame to see the poor guy doing what he did, and then, that leg break, because that knocked his confidence a bit, and it took him a wee while to come back. But again, take my hat off to him, and he came to every single game on his crutches, on a bus, every game, home or away. And again, that just sort of painted a picture of the sort of camaraderie that the club had, amongst the players. It was great.
Do you have any doubts that the guys that you're playing with in the Highland League weren't going to be successful in the league, or could play at that level? You mentioned Gary Clark, there's Colin Milnes, the kind of Mark Simpsons, Lager Perez. Could these guys be as successful as they were in the Highland League? Had you any doubts about that at all?
No, I had no doubts at all. I mean, I believed in all the players that were with the club at the time. I mean, when we went into the league, obviously we brought in Ian Stewart. Rhys Stewart, he was just, again, a phenomenal addition to the club. Hated playing against him, absolutely hated it. But you'd have him in your team every week. A bit like Dougie Baxter was another one. Absolutely loathed the wee dick. Oh, I'm not really sure, but he was because but he would absolutely agree that was just Dougie. He was a hard player with a lot of ability, and you hate playing against him, but you'd have him in your team every week. Stuart was the same. His goal scoring record speaks for itself at all levels. Great wee guy. Great to have in the team as well. The team bus. Loved playing cards. Always had the card schools kicked off. But I think bringing in these Billy Herds and Stuart Mackay's and these players that had Scottish League experience were essential. Does it need to go at the level they're at now? Probably, yeah, it does. I think to maintain the level you're at and better it, you absolutely definitely need to bring in strength and youth as well, because your old players can't play forever. You've seen, Scott Brown moving on. I just saw that in the news today as well. Now, whether you class him as an old player, 27, I think he is.
27, yeah.
And he'll be a big loss to the club. Been there 6 years, and Jim probably won't want to lose him, but Jim's maybe looking at building for the future as well. He's maybe seeing players that are maybe better in that area from a physical presence, fitness wise, and also Scott's maybe got an appetite to go elsewhere and further the rest of his career somewhere else. And you've just got to take your hat off and respect people's wishes and desires or what they want to achieve in their footballing career. But no, I have no doubts that the players that we had at the club have not been able to perform at that level. Definitely not.
A slight irony for yourself. The first game was against Montrose.
Well, actually, my last game of the club was against Montrose as well.
So it comes full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit. It was a bit strange. I think we beat them 2-0. I think.
Yep.
In the first game, yeah, it was. But again, as much as I had a great time down there, and I loved my period there, I was a Peterhead player, and there was absolutely no way Montrose were getting one over us. Absolutely not. And then to play them, I think if I remember, John Sheeran was the manager at Montrose at the time, and we beat them. We beat them quite comfortably. It was 3-0, 3-1 or something. Last game of the season. And that was quite an emotional day. But to play them the first game and the last game was a bit weird, but it was good times.
You mentioned Ian Stewart. How big a statement, if you like, was his signing at that time?
Yeah, it was. It was a big. I think the biggest conversation amongst the players was, I wonder how much money he'd get, because he was just something's associated with that. But no, Ian brought he's a cracking guy in the dressing room, but just his ability and his been able to. I mean, he was just an absolute sniffer in the box, but he fantastic ability. Down the line, he's a little guy, but his ability to score goals in the areas that you wouldn't expect was unbelievable. But he just had a knack. Ian used to. And for me, the sign of a good striker is a striker that doesn't just watch the ball all the time when it's coming. He used to watch the defender. He'd keep an eye on the defender, and as soon as he seen the defender lose concentration, he was away, and he was off, and he had himself in an area, and he bang, he scored a goal, and you're like, well, where did that come from? But he just had a knack of watching you, and as soon as you took your eye off him, he was off. You had lost him. He was so good at that. But no, he was. What it did was it just showed the players, that were at the club at the time that we weren't just in here to make up numbers. We were seriously looking to try and add something to the league. We're not coming in here to be whipping boys. And bringing Ian in was obviously what Ian Wilson wanted to do. I'm wanting an out goal scorer. And it wasn't any disrespect to Colin or any of the other players that were in there. He was just a player that Ian thought, he's going to have that league experience and he's going to add a huge amount to the club, and he did.
Was he the kind of player that if you got the ball, you were immediately trying to look for him in terms of his movement and things like that?
Yeah, I think for players like Sir Scotty and Craig Yates and Stuart Mackay and Kevin Tyndall, they always looked for him because he was a very good link-up player. He was always good at showing. He would go and show and take the ball and lay it back and get. He was very good at playmaking with the midfielders. But as I said, he was very good at finding a space. And as soon as he saw him, he gave him he scored, and that was it. I think different from Gary up front, from a defender's point of view, especially led back. Gary was one of these guys who turned a bad ball into a good ball. But I always knew the area to play the ball in behind the defender, and Gary would get on it every time. But no, Ian was definitely a very good link-up player. It's excellent.
Prior to that season, or maybe after that season had finished, was there a discussion in terms of where the club was wanting, or the board was wanting the club to go? Was there a 5-year plan, if you like, in terms of getting out of that league?
I don't recollect any conversations like that, I have to admit. Generally, things like that don't really come into the dressing room with the players. They may have had a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, I'm not 100% sure, but from a player's point of view, that was never ever really discussed, and generally it doesn't normally hit the players. That's normally something that's kept within the boardroom and the management staff, so that they can, they can build from the youth, upwards with your school academies and so on. But no, I think most of the players at the club at the time, I think were just excited about being part of the Scottish League, and obviously after a few years, obviously I'd moved on, but those that were still left are obviously still doing a really good job and enjoying it. But it was quite noticeable. I kept an eye on the team, and the amount of turnaround of personnel, the team was changing quite quickly. But again, that's because you've got different managers coming in, they've got different views, and they've got different, a different network of players that they can maybe tap into and bring to the club, and that's what resulted in having different players, and it's always going to happen.
So you finished 4th in that first season, which I guess would have been a fairly decent first season. And for yourself personally, you played 35 out of the 36 league games, only missing 1. So how satisfied were you with that first season?
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved it. And I mean, obviously I was getting on a bit. So it was probably a major achievement I managed to play that amount of games. But no, it was being, getting to, coming from the throws back into Highland League, your head does tell you, well, I'm probably in the Highland League to stay now. Probably won't get another opportunity to go and play Scottish League, but to get it, and to get it with a club at Peterhead was brilliant. It was a great achievement of the club. But I thoroughly enjoyed that season. The following season, not so much, and I always bring it up with Ian Wilson. Because I was getting on a bit, I obviously had to train that bit harder, because I think I was 35 the first season, 36 when I left. And I remember I played all the pre-season games, and I mean, it was a tough pre-season, and I didn't miss a training session, and I played really well in the games. Well, I thought I did, and I remember, and I started the games, and when he dropped me, we'd signed Scott Patterson at that time, the ex-Cove Scott Patterson, who was a phenomenal player. And I remember we were away to Stirling Albion, and he dropped me. Wilson did, out of the blue, and all the players were like, what's going on here? And I'd played the previous week and had won the previous week, and he dropped me. And even at my age then, I'd be classed as an experienced player, and I should be taking it, professionally and that. And I did. I took it professionally, but I wasn't happy. And he sensed it when we were out in the warm-up, and he just came up to me and said, "Keep your head up." And I didn't answer him. So he knew I was cheesed off. But I've never forgiven him for that. I keep telling him, because I do see him sometimes, and I always bring it up. But yeah, but again, that's just, and I got, the thing is, the type of player I was, I saw that as a challenge to get back into the team. And I managed to get back in. But yeah, I knew then the writing was on the wall for me. For me to play at that level at 36, 37, it was probably going to be a tall order. But for him to drop me, it's almost like it was a gentle nudge early on in the season. Start thinking about next season, and I'm probably looking into that too much. But that was me. I made my mind up. I was going to be packing in at the end of that season, and again, it was the right decision for me. I probably would have struggled to do another pre-season and games for me to try and get back into the team. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be playing every week. If I felt I was fit enough to do it, I want in, and I don't have the right to demand that, and that's why you've got to move on and take that challenge somewhere else.
Before we get to your final your end of your Peterhead career, there was one, I guess, another highlight in the first season was the Scottish Cup run, which we got to the quarterfinals. Strangely, first season in the league, and here we are, Scottish Cup quarterfinalists. I really would it be safe to say it was a weird cup run? Do you think?
Yeah. I think obviously getting into the quarterfinals was the weird bit, getting a bye. I think we were supposed to play Airdrie.
Airdrie in the previous round, yep.
But yeah, I think was it Gallagher?
It was quite Whitehall Welfare, then Cove, then Morton.
Welfare, yeah. I think I scored that game. I think we had Morton as well at home. Yeah. It was weird. Getting Airdrie and then getting the bye was just, and then going 1-0 up against my old manager Jim Leishman Livingston, going 1-0 up so early on, and then getting one cleared off the line. Ian Stewart was goal bound, and I think Boy Anderson centre half. So we would have been 2-0 up, 1-0 up. But again, it just shows you the level, the fitness. The last 20 minutes, half an hour, we were on our backside. 3-1, and we gave a really good account of ourselves. It was a great day. Martin Johnston scored. Fantastic player, and I'll never forget. He was in tears after the game. Just what it meant to him. It was just it was a great occasion, and again, every player should grasp trying to play at the highest level you can, because the opportunities you potentially get are fantastic as a football player.
Another good player, that Martin Johnson.
Yeah, he's just an honest lad. I mean, it's a travesty what he's going through at the moment, and I absolutely feel for him. But such an honest laddie, fitness, ability, and he's achieved it at Elgin. He was a great player at Cove, but no, just a great lad.
You mentioned your time was coming up at Peterhead, and you almost felt as though you were being pushed towards that. Did that maybe put a dampener on the way it ended slightly? Maybe wasn't it on your terms, if you like?
Well, no. The decision was on my terms. I mean, Ian didn't say I'm releasing you. I said I'm that's my last season. I think Alan and Ian, I think, did want me to stay, but Ian was honest. I can't guarantee you games. I said, well, I wouldn't ask you to. No player at my age would want you to guarantee in a game every week. I wouldn't want to, even if I was 26, I wouldn't want you to guarantee you've got to play for your jersey. But I think I'm glad I made the decision. Whether dropping me early on in the season was his way of giving me a sign, I don't know. But no, I don't think it damaged it. I'm glad I left the club the way I did. And probably playing against my ex-club Montrose in the last game was a bit of irony. I'm not sure, but it was a great day. It was emotional for me. I'm not scared to admit it. I was tears in the dressing room because I loved playing with the club. I had a lot of really good memories and achievements there, and it's difficult to leave a club like that. But no, I was glad the way it happened.
Yeah, 10 years at one club is maybe unheard of, maybe these days. So you're right. Probably leaving there for the last time maybe was emotional for you.
Yeah, I just think when you do put your all into a club, and you go through a lot of different types of journeys throughout that period, there is going to be an emotional attachment to it. Especially what we had achieved. Whether that's a team thing or a personal achievement. I wouldn't have won Highland League Player of the Year if I wasn't with Peterhead. I don't think. And just through that was that that successful period, everybody was on a high, and there was a lot of personal achievements within the club as well as the team. Winning the awards that we did. But yeah, leaving the club was difficult. Don't get me wrong. Should I have stayed and tried to play on and be a squad player, and then maybe be involved in the backroom stuff, maybe doing the youngsters? Would that have been the right decision? Who knows? I made the decision for me. It was the right thing to do, and then I moved on and managed to play a few more years, which I wanted to keep playing. I felt I was fit enough, and when your head tells you and your body tells you still think you can do it at a certain level, then you want to carry on. So going from Scottish League back into Highland League, which I did, was probably the right thing, because I still had a good few years and I was able to add some value to the club I went to.
Did you watch from afar how far the club then progressed under Ian Stewart as a co-manager with Paul Mathers?
Yeah, I kept it. We sort of kept an eye on. I was, when he, I think it was at Partick Thistle scored in the dying seconds, sort of getting into the playoffs, and and I felt from then, and the way that Ian left the club as well, I felt for him as well. Paul was a great, when Paul came into the club, a great keeper and great coach as well, and worked well with Ian. But yeah, I kept an eye on it, and you always want the clubs that you've got a lot of fond memories with. You always want them to do well. Absolutely, I'm no different now. Even the 2 years I had at Rothes, I see how well they're doing, and the same in Montrose. We keep in touch. A lot of the guys in Montrose and still go down. Peterhead, seen them do successfully. And I'm no different with Keith. I had 2, 3, 4 good years at Keith, and then got into management with Darren. Darren still again was another chapter in my football career that I'll never forget, and was the right decision at the time to make with Darren. And again, I look at how Keith are doing as well. So I've not had a lot of clubs. There's a lot of players that have jumped about in a lot of clubs. I've not had many, and I'm glad I haven't, because I've still got a lot of ties with a lot of these clubs, and I'm very fond of them.
How would you sum up your 10 years at Peterhead then, if you can, because it's a long time to sum up, but how would you sum it up?
A lot of highs, probably more highs than lows. There is lows, there's always lows in football, but I think some of the achievements that we had were, that 17-0, at least 19 goals conceded, winning the league, the qualifying cup final against Fraserburgh, the 8-0, I'll mention it again. But I think the amount of friends I've made up there, and not just with the locals but with players as well. I think that's something you can't forget. I think that the whole journey, going from Recreation Park to Barnmore and then going into the Scottish League, being a part of that and seeing the club changing and people changing and embracing it and getting to where they are now, I think they've got to take huge credit as a community. So it's a difficult one. I think that the 10 years, I just loved the journey. And for me, the journey was joining a club that probably at the time were struggling. You just needed to look at the league position, but they had potential with some of the players there. It was obvious that we needed to add to that and bring in experience. And that journey was what the directors did. The two Rogers came in, management changed, players came and went, and that was that journey again. And the prize at the end of it was obviously that season that we won the league.
I think it maybe goes without saying, but you guys that were part of that first season, the second season, and the first few years having joined the league, maybe set the foundations for how the club is going on and where they're at now. And like yourselves, Mark Simpson, Ivor Perry, we keep mentioning these guys, but without them, maybe we wouldn't have been in the position we're at now.
Probably not. I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I'd like to think what we did was we probably came in and showed the league at that time that we weren't in here just to make up numbers. You know, you look at fifth and fourth. You know, a Highland League club coming into the league, we didn't spend a lot of money at the first season. To achieve a fifth position was, again, a great achievement. Then you have to start looking at investing and bringing in better quality players, more experience. Then you need to start developing youth, bringing in youngsters to backfill those that are going to move on. But I think what we will have done to the club, you can't say that us as players have contributed to where the club is now, because that's a difficult thing to say, that what we did in the league when we joined 20 years later, they're benefiting from it. I would say the club on a whole will have benefited from any mistakes or different decisions they made during our time. And I think they'll have, throughout the years, been learning from any mistakes that they've done. And it can be things about how do they raise money as a board, what sponsors do they bring in, what managers do they bring in that are going to take us. You know, they've obviously got the right manager at the moment and have done for a number of years. And I think that's probably where the club has developed to where they are now, is basically because you only learn from mistakes that are made. So yeah, I would say us joining. I'm not going to say that us as players have made the club the way they are now. Absolutely not. I'd like to think we've contributed to it, especially how we started those first 2-3 years, definitely.
Well, Steve, it's been an absolute thrill to have you on. Genuinely, really pleased to have got you on and chatted with you. I've enjoyed it. Enjoyed the stories. So hopefully you've enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, hopefully I've probably got a few things wrong. I'm going to get a few texts next time when it goes out. I'll be saying, he didn't play then, and he didn't play then, and no, you didn't score hat-trick. But yeah, no, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, Colin. Thanks for inviting me to come on.
No, as I said, it's just been a genuine pleasure of mine, because growing up in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, you were one of the players that I always had liked, and likes of Ivor Perry. So it was genuinely pleasing just to get you on.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Okay, cheers.
Colin. Cheers.